What happens when a billionaire's mistress discovers his pregnant wife at the hospital? This isn't just another cheating scandal. When Sophia Brennan walked into her husband's office with ultrasound photos of their baby girl, she never expected to witness Derek kissing his assistant Madison. But that shocking discovery was only the beginning. What Madison did next in that hospital room was so calculated, so vicious, that it nearly killed both mother and baby. This is the true story of how one woman's jealousy turned into attempted murder, and how a pregnant wife fought back against a predator who almost destroyed everything. Hit that like button if you are ready for this wild ride. And don't forget to subscribe because this story will leave you speechless. The ultrasound photo trembled in Sophia Brennan's hands as she stood in Derek's penthouse kitchen, her 7-month pregnant belly pressing against the marble countertop. After 3 years of trying, 3 heartbreaking miscarriages, and countless fertility treatments, the black and white image finally showed what they had prayed for: a daughter, their perfect baby girl. Sophia smoothed her maternity dress and checked the time. Derek's flight from Tokyo had landed early, and she wanted everything to be perfect for this moment. The dining table was set with their wedding china, candles flickered warmly, and his favorite meal from Chez Laurent waited in the warming drawer. She had rehearsed this moment dozens of times. Derek would walk through the door, exhausted from his business trip, and she would hand him the ultrasound photo with a simple statement: "It's a girl, Derek, our daughter." The penthouse felt enormous around her, 40 floors above Manhattan, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the glittering city below. Everything in their life looked perfect from the outside. Derek Caldwell, the 35-year-old tech billionaire who had built Caldwell Dynamics from a college dorm room idea into a $5 billion empire. Sophia, the former marketing executive who had given up her career to support his dreams and start their family. But lately, something had felt wrong. Derek worked later hours, traveled more frequently, and seemed distant during their conversations. When she mentioned the baby or nursery plans, his responses felt rehearsed rather than genuine. She told herself it was normal stress from running a major corporation, that having a daughter would bring them closer together again. Her phone buzzed with a text from Derek's assistant, Madison Torres. "Derek asked me to let you know he'll be at the office for a few hours to handle some urgent Tokyo follow-up. He should be home by 8. Sophia frowned. Derek usually called her directly with schedule changes, and he had promised to come straight home after his red-eye flight. But the ultrasound news was too important to wait. She would surprise him at the office instead. 30 minutes later, Sophia stood in the pristine marble lobby of Caldwell Dynamics. The dinner she had packed carefully arranged in an insulated bag. The security guard recognized her immediately and waved her toward the executive elevators with a warm smile. "Mrs. Caldwell, nice to see you. Mr. Caldwell is up in his office." The 37th floor executive level was quiet except for the hum of climate control and the distant sound of traffic far below. Sophia walked down the hallway toward Derek's corner office, her heels clicking against the polished marble. She could see light spilling from his office through the floor-to-ceiling glass walls that made the executive level feel open and modern. She stopped walking when she saw them. Derek stood behind his massive desk, his hands cupping the face of Madison Torres, his 26-year-old assistant. Madison's perfectly manicured fingers gripped the lapels of his suit jacket as they kissed with desperate passion. Madison's red dress was hiked up slightly, and Derek's tie hung loose around his neck. The ultrasound photo slipped from Sophia's fingers and fluttered to the marble floor. Madison opened her eyes during the kiss and looked directly at Sophia through the glass wall. Instead of pulling away in shock or embarrassment, Madison smiled against Derek's lips and kissed him more aggressively, her hands tangling in his hair. Sophia felt her knees buckle as the shock hit her nervous system like ice water. A sharp pain ripped through her abdomen, and she doubled over, pressing her hand against her pregnant belly. The contractions came fast and intense, accompanied by a warm wetness between her legs that terrified her more than the betrayal she had just witnessed. "No, no, no," she whispered, clutching the glass wall for support as another contraction crashed through her body. The office door opened, and Derek emerged first, his face going white when he saw his pregnant wife collapsed against the hallway wall. Madison followed, smoothing her dress with calculated composure, her lipstick somehow still perfectly applied. "Sophia, what are you doing here? Oh God, are you hurt?" Derek rushed toward her, his Italian leather shoes echoing in the empty hallway. The ambulance ride to Manhattan General Hospital passed in a blur of sirens, medical equipment, and Derek's panicked voice answering paramedic questions. Sophia clutched her belly while the EMTs monitored her vital signs. Their professional calm, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos consuming her thoughts. 29-year-old female, 31 weeks pregnant, the lead paramedic called out as they wheeled Sophia through the emergency department doors. Patient experienced sudden onset contractions following emotional distress, blood pressure elevated and climbing. James Mitchell, the emergency department chief and Sophia's uncle, appeared within minutes of their arrival. His weathered face showed immediate concern as he took in Sophia's condition and the circumstances that had brought her here. "Get her to room 3, Dr. Mitchell instructed the medical team. "I want continuous fetal monitoring and a full workup. And someone page obstetrics immediately." As Sophia was transferred to the hospital bed, she felt her daughter moving restlessly inside her, as if the baby could sense the stress and danger surrounding them both. The fetal monitor was attached quickly, and soon the room filled with the rapid but strong heartbeat that provided Sophia's first moment of relief since discovering Derek's betrayal. "Uncle James," Sophia whispered as Dr. Mitchell checked her vital signs. "Something's really wrong. The contractions started when I saw them together." Mitchell's expression darkened as he processed the implications of what his niece was telling him. He had never particularly liked Derek Caldwell, finding him emotionally distant and calculating. But he had hoped his concerns were simply the protective instincts of a man who had helped raise Sophia after her father died. "Your blood pressure is dangerously elevated," Dr. Mitchell said gently but firmly. "We need to get these contractions under control and keep that stress level down. This kind of shock can trigger premature labor or other serious complications." Derek paced outside the room while the medical team worked, his usually perfect appearance disheveled from the crisis. His dark hair was messed from running his hands through it, and his expensive suit looked rumpled. He kept trying to call his business partner, Tyler Brooks, but the calls went straight to voicemail. Madison Torres stood near the reception desk, her red dress and confident posture making her look completely out of place in the medical environment. She spoke quietly on her phone, but her voice carried clearly across the waiting area. "Yes, I'm at the hospital with Derek," Madison said in her phone. "His wife is having some kind of pregnancy drama. It's obviously stress-related and probably exaggerated for attention." Several nurses looked up from their stations, their professional expressions showing disapproval for Madison's callous comments about a patient in distress. Emergency departments saw enough genuine medical crises to recognize when someone was minimizing serious symptoms. Mitchell emerged from Sophia's room and approached Derek with the controlled authority of someone accustomed to delivering difficult news to family members in crisis situations. "Derek, your wife is developing preeclampsia," Mitchell said quietly. "Her blood pressure is at dangerous levels, and any additional stress could trigger premature labor. I need you to understand that both Sophia and the baby are at risk right now." Derek's face went even paler as the medical reality of the situation hit him. "Is the baby going to be okay? Is Sophia going to be okay? If we can get her blood pressure stabilized and keep her calm for the next few hours, both should be fine," Dr. Mitchell replied. "But that means no additional emotional trauma. She needs absolute calm and support right now." Madison approached them as Dr. Mitchell finished explaining Sophia's condition, her heels clicking against the hospital floor with the same confident rhythm she used when walking through the Caldwell Dynamics offices. "Derek, I think I should stay," Madison announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions in professional settings. "Someone rational needs to be here to make sure the doctors understand that Sophia has a tendency toward dramatic reactions." Dr. Mitchell turned to look at Madison with the expression he reserved for family members who interfered with patient care. In 30 years of emergency medicine, he had learned to identify people who created problems rather than solve them. "And you are, Dr. Mitchell asked, his voice carrying professional politeness that barely concealed his disapproval. "Madison Torres, Derek's assistant, and—" Madison paused deliberately. "Close friend. I was with him when this incident occurred." The emphasis on close friend was clearly intended to establish Madison's importance and her right to be involved in decisions about Sophia's medical care. But Dr. Mitchell had spent decades protecting vulnerable patients from exactly this kind of manipulative behavior. "Miss Torres," Dr. Mitchell said with the calm authority that made him one of the most respected physicians in the hospital, This is a medical facility, not a corporate boardroom. Patient care decisions are made by medical professionals and immediate family members only. Madison's perfect composure cracked slightly at being dismissed so firmly by someone who couldn't be intimidated by wealth or professional status. She was accustomed to using her relationship with Derek to command respect and attention, but Dr. Mitchell was immune to that kind of social manipulation. Derek, Madison said, turning back to him with renewed determination, you need to make sure the doctors understand that Sophia is prone to exaggeration. This whole hospital visit is probably unnecessary drama designed to get your attention. Derek looked between Madison and Dr. Mitchell, clearly struggling with competing loyalties and his own guilt about the situation. The confident businessman who commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals seemed unable to process the medical crisis his personal choices had created. For nearly an hour, Sophia's condition appeared to stabilize. The contractions had slowed, her blood pressure was coming down with medication, and the baby's heartbeat remained strong and steady. Derek sat beside her hospital bed, holding her hand and making promises about how everything would be different once they got through this crisis. I'm so sorry, Sophia, Derek said quietly, his voice carrying what seemed like genuine remorse. The thing with Madison, it was a mistake. A terrible mistake that I've been trying to figure out how to end. Sophia studied her husband's face, looking for the man she had fallen in love with in college, the man who had proposed to her on a beach in Maui with tears in his eyes. That Derek had been passionate about changing the world through technology, excited about building a family together, emotionally present in ways that made her feel cherished and protected. How long has it been going on? Sophia asked, needing to understand the scope of the betrayal even though the truth would hurt. 3 months, Derek admitted, unable to meet her eyes. It started during the Singapore trip when you were recovering from the miscarriage in February. I was angry and hurt, and Madison was there offering comfort and distraction. The timing made Sophia's heart ache even more, while she had been grieving their lost pregnancy and trying to heal emotionally. Derek had been starting an affair with his assistant. The betrayal felt even deeper knowing it had begun during one of the most vulnerable periods of her life. But it's over now, Derek continued quickly. Seeing you like this, seeing what my choices have done to you and our daughter, I know I have to end it completely. Madison means nothing compared to you and our family. Dr. Mitchell appeared in the doorway, carrying Sophia's latest test results with an expression that suggested cautiously good news. The veteran physician had seen enough medical crises to know when a situation was improving versus when it was simply taking a temporary pause before getting worse. The contractions have stopped completely, and your blood pressure is much better, Dr. Mitchell reported to Sophia. If these numbers stay stable for another few hours, you should be able to go home with strict bed rest instructions. Sophia felt relief wash over her for the first time since discovering Derek's affair. Their daughter was safe. The immediate medical crisis was passing, and Derek seemed genuinely committed to ending his relationship with Madison and rebuilding their marriage. Thank you, Uncle James, Sophia said, squeezing Derek's hand. I was so scared that something would happen to the baby. Your daughter is a fighter, just like her mother, Dr. Mitchell replied with a smile. But no more stress or surprises. Complete rest and calm for the remainder of your pregnancy. Derek stood up and kissed Sophia's forehead gently. I need to go tell Madison that she should go home. This is family time, and she doesn't belong here. As Derek left the room to speak with Madison, Sophia allowed herself to hope that this crisis might actually strengthen their marriage. Sometimes it took nearly losing everything to understand what really mattered. Derek had seen the consequences of his choices played out in a hospital room, and it seemed to have shocked him back to his priorities. Through the open doorway, Sophia could see Derek approaching Madison near the nurse's station. Madison was seated in one of the waiting area chairs, scrolling through her phone with the casual confidence of someone who felt entirely comfortable in the situation. Madison, I think it's best if you go home now, Derek said quietly, his voice carrying across the emergency department waiting area. Sophia is stable, and I need to focus on my family right now. Madison looked up from her phone with an expression of surprise that seemed slightly performed, as if she had been expecting this conversation and had prepared her response. Derek, are you sure you want to make decisions while you're emotional and stressed? Madison asked, standing up and moving closer to him. We should talk about this privately before you say something you'll regret. The possessive way Madison touched Derek's arm while speaking made it clear that she had no intention of accepting dismissal gracefully. Her body language suggested ownership and familiarity that went far beyond a professional relationship, even beyond a simple affair. Derek looked back towards Sophia's room, then at Madison, clearly struggling with the conversation. Madison, what happened today made me realize that I can't keep living a lie. I love my wife, and I'm about to become a father. I have to end this relationship. Relationship, Madison repeated, her voice rising slightly. Derek, what we have goes way beyond some guilty affair. You've told me things about your marriage that you can't just pretend didn't happen, about how unhappy you've been, how different we are together. Mitchell, who was reviewing charts at the nurse's station, looked up at the increasingly tense conversation happening near his patient's room. His protective instincts were activated by the obvious emotional manipulation he was witnessing. We've been planning a future together, Madison continued, her voice becoming more insistent. You can't just throw that away because your wife had a pregnancy scare. This is exactly the kind of dramatic manipulation she's always used to control you. Sophia could hear every word from her hospital bed, and each sentence felt like another betrayal. Derek hadn't just been having a physical affair. He had been sharing intimate details about their marriage and apparently making future plans with Madison. The baby monitor showed a slight increase in the heartbeat as Sophia's stress levels began rising again. The brief period of hope and security was already beginning to crumble as she realized the depth of Derek's emotional involvement with Madison. Derek returned to Sophia's room after his conversation with Madison, but his demeanor had changed in subtle ways that Sophia immediately noticed. He seemed less confident about his decision to end the affair, and he avoided direct eye contact while settling back into the chair beside her bed. Is she gone? Sophia asked, though she could still see Madison's red dress through the doorway as the other woman continued to pace near the nurse's station. She's leaving, Derek said, but his tone suggested the conversation hadn't gone as smoothly as he had hoped. Madison is concerned about the Singapore project and some other business issues. She wants to make sure everything is handled properly before she steps back. The fact that Derek was still referring to their affair in business terms made Sophia's stomach tighten with anxiety. This wasn't a man who had just ended a relationship. This was someone who was trying to manage a complicated situation without fully committing to either side. Derek, I need you to be completely honest with me, Sophia said, her voice stronger despite her physical exhaustion. What exactly did you tell Madison about our marriage? What kind of future were you planning with her? Derek's hesitation before answering told Sophia everything she needed to know. The affair wasn't just physical attraction or a moment of weakness. It was a relationship that Derek had been nurturing and developing while his wife struggled with pregnancy complications and miscarriages. I may have talked to Madison about some of the difficulties we've been having, Derek admitted carefully. The fertility treatments, the stress, the way we've grown apart over the past year. She was someone I could talk to about things that felt too complicated to discuss with you. What kind of future? Derek, Sophia pressed, needing to understand the full scope of his betrayal. Before Derek could answer, Madison Torres appeared in the doorway of Sophia's hospital room, no longer maintaining the pretense of leaving the building. Her red dress and confident posture made her look like a corporate executive attending a business meeting rather than someone visiting a medical facility. Sophia, I think we need to have an honest conversation, Madison announced, walking into the room without invitation or permission. Derek asked me to explain the situation to you directly, since there seems to be some confusion about what's been happening. Dr. Mitchell looked up from his charts and immediately moved towards Sophia's room when he saw Madison entering without authorization. Hospital protocol strictly limited access to patient rooms, especially for people who weren't immediate family members. Ma'am, you can't be in the patient's room without permission, Dr. Mitchell said firmly as he reached through the doorway. It's okay, Dr. Mitchell, Madison replied with the smooth confidence she used in boardrooms. Derek asked me to speak with Sophia about some important matters that affect their family's future. Sophia felt her blood pressure rising again as Madison's presence in the room triggered every instinct that told her this woman was a threat to her safety and her family's well-being. The fetal monitor began beeping faster as the baby responded to Sophia's increased stress levels. Derek didn't ask you to do anything, Sophia said, her voice growing stronger with anger. He told you to leave the hospital. Madison smiled with the kind of calculated sweetness that made her intentions clear to everyone in the room except Derek, who seemed frozen by the confrontation between his wife and his mistress. Sophia, I understand that you're upset and confused by everything that's happened today, Madison said, moving closer to the hospital bed. But Derek and I need you to understand that our relationship isn't just some casual affair that can be ended because of a pregnancy scare. The words hit Sophia like physical blows, each one designed to undermine her sense of security and her hopes for reconciliation with Derek. Madison's use of our relationship made it clear that she had no intention of stepping aside gracefully. Derek has been unhappy in your marriage for over a year, Madison continued, her voice taking on the tone of someone delivering a business presentation. He's told me extensively about the problems you've been having, the lack of intimacy, the way you've used your fertility struggles to manipulate his attention and guilt. Mitchell stepped forward immediately when he saw the fetal monitor alarms increasing and Sophia's obvious distress at Madison's verbal attack. That's enough, Dr. B. Mitchell said with the authority of someone who had spent decades protecting patients from exactly this kind of abusive behavior. Miss Torres, you need to leave this room immediately. You're causing documented medical distress to my patient. But Madison had clearly prepared for this moment and had no intention of being dismissed by medical protocol or family loyalties. Dr. Mitchell, I understand your concern for Sophia, but someone needs to make sure she understands the reality of her situation, Madison said, maintaining her professional tone while delivering increasingly cruel statements. Derek and I have been planning a life together. We've looked at apartments, discussed marriage, talked about having children together. Sophia felt the world spinning around her as Madison's words revealed the true depth of Derek's betrayal. This wasn't an affair that could be ended with an apology and marriage counseling. This was a parallel relationship that Derek had been building while his wife struggled with pregnancy complications. Derek, is that true? Sophia whispered, looking at her husband with desperate hope that Madison was lying or exaggerating. Derek's silence lasted only 3 seconds, but those 3 seconds contained an entire universe of betrayal. His inability to immediately deny Madison's claims told Sophia everything she needed to know about his real priorities and commitments. The fetal monitor alarms became increasingly urgent as Sophia's blood pressure spiked to dangerous levels. But Madison seemed to interpret the medical crisis as an opportunity to deliver her final devastating blow. The 3 seconds of Derek's silence stretched into an eternity before he finally found his voice. But his response came too late to undo the damage his hesitation had caused. Madison, that's not how it was, Derek said weakly, his voice lacking the immediate conviction that Sophia desperately needed to hear. We talked about possibilities, but those weren't concrete plans. Madison's smile became predatory as she realized Derek's weak response had given her the opening she needed to destroy any remaining hope Sophia might have for reconciling their marriage. Derek, don't minimize what we have, Madison said, pulling her phone from her purse with theatrical precision. Sophia deserves to know the truth about the apartment we toured last week. The engagement ring you helped me pick out. The discussions about timing our wedding for after her pregnancy complications are resolved. Sophia felt her heart literally skip beats as Madison's words painted a picture of systematic deception that went far beyond a simple affair. Derek hadn't just betrayed their marriage vows. He had been actively planning to replace her while she carried his child. You picked out an engagement ring, Sophia whispered, the words barely audible above the increasingly urgent sounds of the medical monitors surrounding her bed. Dr. Mitchell moved quickly to check Sophia's vital signs, his medical training overriding his personal anger at the emotional abuse he was witnessing. Her blood pressure had spiked to levels that could trigger seizures or other life-threatening complications. Miss Torres, you need to leave this room immediately, Dr. Mitchell ordered, his voice carrying the full authority of his position as department chief. You're causing a medical emergency. But Madison had clearly planned this confrontation carefully and wasn't going to be deterred by medical concerns or professional authority. She scrolled through her phone with deliberate slowness, as if looking for specific evidence to support her claims. Here's the receipt from Tiffany, Madison announced, holding up her phone screen towards Sophia. Derek spent $43,000 on my engagement ring last Tuesday, the same day you had your doctor's appointment to check on pregnancy complications. The timing of Derek's ring purchase while Sophia was dealing with medical concerns about their unborn daughter made the betrayal feel even more calculated and cruel. He had been shopping for engagement rings for his mistress, while his wife worried about losing their baby. "Derek, please tell me she's lying," Sophia pleaded, looking at her husband with desperate hope that Madison was manipulating the situation for her own purposes. Derek's face had gone completely white, and his inability to immediately deny Madison's claims confirmed that every horrible detail was true. He had indeed been planning a future with Madison while maintaining the pretense of working on his marriage with Sophia. The ring it was just something we looked at, Derek stammered, his voice lacking any conviction. Nothing was decided, nothing was final. Madison laughed with genuine amusement at Derek's pathetic attempt to minimize his actions. "Nothing was final, Derek. You put a deposit down on the apartment in Soho. You introduced me to your business partners as your future wife. You told me you were waiting for the right time to ask Sophia for a divorce." Each revelation hit Sophia like a physical blow, and the fetal monitor alarms became increasingly frantic as their daughter responded to the extreme stress her mother was experiencing. Dr. Mitchell realized he was witnessing psychological warfare designed to cause maximum emotional damage to a vulnerable pregnant patient. "Security to room 3 immediately," Dr. Mitchell called, activating the hospital's protocol for removing dangerous visitors. "And get me a psychiatric consult. We have a patient in severe emotional distress." But Madison had saved her most devastating revelation for last, timing it perfectly to coincide with the arrival of hospital security. "Sophia, there's one more thing you need to know," Madison said with the calm precision of someone delivering a carefully planned killing blow. "I'm pregnant too. 11 weeks along with Derek's baby. We found out 3 days ago." The words hit the room like an explosion. Sophia's blood pressure monitor began screaming alarms as her body went into shock from the psychological trauma. Dr. Mitchell immediately called for emergency assistance as Sophia's condition deteriorated rapidly. "That's not possible," Derek said, his voice reflecting genuine shock at Madison's announcement. "We always use protection. You told me you were on birth control." Madison's smile revealed the calculated nature of her pregnancy claim. "Birth control fails, Derek, just like your marriage. The difference is that I'm prepared to give you the family you actually want, not the complicated mess you have with Sophia." Sophia felt consciousness slipping away as her body shut down in response to the overwhelming emotional trauma. The last thing she heard before losing awareness was Madison's voice continuing to attack her while medical staff rushed into the room. "She's seizing," Dr. Mitchell announced as Sophia's body began convulsing. "Get me 2 milligrams of lorazepam and call obstetrics immediately. We may need to deliver this baby tonight." As medical staff worked frantically to stabilize Sophia and monitor their unborn daughter, Madison Torres stood near the doorway watching the crisis she had deliberately created with evident satisfaction. She had successfully destroyed Derek's marriage and eliminated Sophia as competition for his attention and resources. Derek stood frozen beside Sophia's bed, finally understanding the full scope of Madison's manipulation and his own responsibility for creating a situation that had put both his wife and unborn daughter in mortal danger. Security officers arrived to escort Madison from the hospital, but the damage had already been done. Sophia's condition had deteriorated from stable to critical in a matter of minutes, and Dr. Mitchell wasn't certain they could save both mother and baby. The emergency obstetrics team arrived within minutes of Sophia's seizure, transforming her hospital room into a surgical preparation area as they worked to stabilize both mother and baby. Dr. Mitchell coordinated the response while monitoring Sophia's vital signs, which remained dangerously unstable despite medication. "Blood pressure is 190 over 110 and climbing," announced Dr. Sarah Wilson, the head of obstetrics who had been called in for the emergency. "We're looking at severe preeclampsia with seizure activity. I want to get her to the OR immediately." Derek stood pressed against the wall, watching medical professionals work to save his wife and daughter while processing the devastating revelations Madison had delivered. The woman he thought he knew had systematically destroyed his family with calculated precision that suggested months of planning. "Sir, you'll need to wait outside," Dr. Wilson told Derek as the medical team prepared to move Sophia to surgery. "We'll keep you updated on both patients' conditions." As Sophia was wheeled toward the operating room, Derek caught a glimpse of Madison Torres being escorted from the building by hospital security. Even as she was being removed, Madison maintained her confident posture and seemed satisfied with the chaos she had created. Tyler Brooks, Derek's business partner and closest friend since college, arrived at the hospital 30 minutes after receiving Derek's frantic phone call. Tyler had always been the pragmatic voice in their business relationship, and his first look at Derek's disheveled appearance told him this crisis went far beyond medical complications. "What the hell happened?" Tyler asked, pulling Derek into a private corner of the waiting area. "Your message said Sophia was in emergency surgery, but you sounded like you were having a breakdown." Derek found himself confessing everything to Tyler, the affair with Madison, the plans they had made together, the devastating revelations that had triggered Sophia's medical crisis. With each detail, Tyler's expression grew more disgusted and angry. "You bought Madison an engagement ring while Sophia was dealing with pregnancy complications?" Tyler asked, his voice carrying the disbelief of someone discovering that his closest friend was capable of unfathomable selfishness. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way," Derek said weakly. "Madison told me she understood that ending my marriage had to be handled carefully because of the pregnancy. She said she was willing to wait until after Sophia gave birth." Tyler stared at his business partner and realized he was looking at a stranger. The Derek Caldwell he had known since college might have been ambitious and sometimes emotionally distant, but he had never been cruel or calculating in ways that could endanger innocent people. "Derek, Madison played you," Tyler said with the clarity that came from not being emotionally involved in the situation. "She manipulated you into making promises and financial commitments, then used those commitments to destroy your marriage when it served her purposes." Dr. Mitchell emerged from the surgical area with an update on Sophia's condition, his expression showing cautious relief but continued concern for both patients. "The surgery went well," Mitchell announced to Derek and Tyler. "We were able to stabilize Sophia's blood pressure and stop the seizure activity. The baby appears to be handling the stress remarkably well, though we'll continue monitoring both of them closely." Derek felt overwhelming relief mixed with crushing guilt as he realized how close he had come to losing both his wife and daughter because of his own selfish choices. "Can I see her?" Derek asked, though he wasn't sure he deserved the privilege of being at Sophia's bedside after everything that had happened. "She's heavily sedated and will be for several hours." Mitchell replied, "But Derek, I need you to understand something. Sophia's condition was caused by extreme emotional trauma. Any additional stress could trigger another crisis that might not have such a positive outcome." The implication was clear. Derek's presence might itself be dangerous to Sophia's recovery if she woke up and had to face the full reality of his betrayal while her body was still vulnerable to stress-related complications. Tyler pulled Derek aside after Dr. Mitchell returned to check on Sophia, needing to address business implications that Derek seemed incapable of processing in his current emotional state. "Derek, we need to talk about Madison's position at the company," Tyler said quietly. "What happened here tonight isn't just a personal matter anymore. She deliberately caused a medical crisis for a pregnant woman. The legal and public relations implications are enormous." Derek looked at Tyler with confusion, as if he couldn't understand why business concerns mattered when his family was in crisis. "Madison Torres no longer works for Caldwell Dynamics," Tyler continued firmly. "I'm terminating her employment immediately, and we need to review every project she's been involved with to assess potential damage to client relationships and company operations." The practical implications of Tyler's decision began penetrating Derek's emotional fog. Madison hadn't just destroyed his marriage, she had potentially damaged the company they had spent years building by creating a scandal that could affect investor confidence and client relationships. "But she knows all our Singapore contracts," Derek protested weakly. "She's been handling the overseas expansion project." Tyler's expression hardened as he realized Derek was still thinking about protecting Madison's interests even after witnessing her deliberately endanger his pregnant wife. "Derek, Madison Torres just caused your wife to have seizures that could have killed both her and your daughter," Tyler said with brutal clarity. "If you're worried about her career prospects right now, you need serious psychological help." The harsh truth of Tyler's words finally penetrated Derek's denial and forced him to confront the full magnitude of what had happened. Madison had never been the victim of complicated circumstances. She had been the architect of a plan to destroy his marriage and eliminate Sophia as competition for his attention and resources. Derek's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "I hope you're happy with your choice. When you're ready to be with someone who actually appreciates what you can offer, you know how to reach me. M." Tyler saw Derek reading the message and immediately understood that Madison's psychological warfare wasn't finished. Even after being escorted from the hospital by security, she was continuing her campaign to manipulate Derek's emotions and maintain control over the situation. "Give me your phone, cállese," Tyler demanded, extending his hand with the authority of someone who had spent years protecting their business from various threats and manipulative people. Tyler deleted Madison's contact information, blocked her number, and began composing a message to the company's legal team about potential restraining order requirements and criminal charges for endangering a pregnant woman. Derek slumped into a waiting room chair as the full weight of his choices finally hit him. He had nearly lost everything that mattered because he had been manipulated by someone who understood exactly how to exploit his weaknesses and insecurities. 3 hours after Sophia's emergency surgery, Mitchell finally allowed Derek to see his wife, though she remained heavily sedated and connected to multiple monitors tracking both her condition and the baby's vital signs. Derek sat beside her bed, holding her hand and trying to process the full scope of damage his choices had caused. Sophia's mother, Claire Brennan, arrived at the hospital just before midnight, having driven directly from her home in Connecticut after receiving Mitchell's emergency call. As a retired family court judge, Claire had spent decades dealing with the aftermath of marital betrayals and domestic conflicts, but seeing her own daughter as the victim of psychological abuse activated protective instincts that overrode her usual judicial temperament. "Derek," Claire said quietly as she entered Sophia's hospital room, her voice carrying the controlled authority that had made her one of the most respected judges in the state. "James told me what happened here tonight." Derek looked up from Sophia's bedside, his face showing genuine remorse, mixed with the desperate hope that somehow the damage could be repaired through apologies and promises of change. "Mrs. Brennan, I know how this looks, but I never intended for Madison to hurt Sophia." Derek began, but Claire held up her hand with the gesture she had used to silence countless defendants and attorneys over her 30-year career. "Derek, intent doesn't matter when the result is my pregnant daughter having seizures from psychological trauma," Claire said with judicial precision. "What matters now is preventing additional harm and ensuring my granddaughter's safety." Tyler Brooks appeared in the doorway carrying a tablet and several printed documents that suggested he had spent the past few hours investigating Madison Torres with the thoroughness that had made him successful in business and would now be applied to protecting his friend's family. "Derek, we need to talk about Madison," Tyler said, his expression showing the kind of grim satisfaction that came from uncovering important information. "I've been reviewing her employment records and background, and there are some things you need to know." Claire looked between Derek and Tyler, recognizing the dynamics of a business partnership where one person handled emotional crises while the other managed practical implications. Her judicial experience told her that Tyler's investigation had probably uncovered information that would change how everyone understood Madison's motivations and methods. "What did you find?" Derek asked. Though his voice suggested he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer, Tyler set his tablet on the bedside table and began presenting his findings with the systematic approach he used for business presentations. Though this information was far more personally devastating than quarterly financial reports, Madison Torres was fired from her previous job at Morrison Financial for having an affair with a married client and attempting to extort money from his wife when the relationship ended. Tyler began, reading from his notes. She was also terminated from a position at Henderson Marketing for inappropriate relationships with senior executives and harassment of their spouses. Derek's face went white as Tyler's revelations painted a picture of systematic, predatory behavior that made Madison's pursuit of their relationship look like a calculated business strategy rather than romantic attraction. "There's more," Tyler continued. "Madison's pregnancy claim is almost certainly false. I contacted her doctor's office using company insurance information, and there's no record of any pregnancy-related appointments or treatments." The revelation that Madison had lied about being pregnant hit Derek like a physical blow. She had used a fake pregnancy announcement to deliver maximum psychological damage to Sophia during her most vulnerable moment, demonstrating a level of calculated cruelty that was difficult to comprehend. Claire processed Tyler's information with the analytical skills she had developed during decades of family court cases involving manipulation, fraud, and psychological abuse. "Derek, what Tyler is describing isn't an affair or a relationship," Claire said with professional clarity. "It's a pattern of predatory behavior targeting wealthy married men. Madison Torres identified you as a mark and executed a plan to extract money and status from you while destroying your marriage. The truth of Claire's assessment was undeniable when viewed alongside Tyler's investigation results. Madison had never been Derek's girlfriend or potential future wife. She had been running a sophisticated con game designed to manipulate his emotions and access his financial resources. Derek's phone buzzed with another message from Madison, but this time Tyler immediately confiscated the device before Derek could read the latest attempt at psychological manipulation. No more contact with Madison Torres, Tyler announced with the authority of someone making a business decision. All future communication goes through our legal team, and we're filing for restraining orders first thing Monday morning. Dr. Mitchell returned to check on Sophia's condition and was pleased to find her vital signs stable and the baby showing no signs of distress from the evening's trauma. However, he remained concerned about the psychological impact when Sophia woke up and had to confront the full reality of Derek's betrayal. How much does she remember about what happened before the seizure? Derek asked, dreading the answer but needing to understand what Sophia would have to process during her recovery. She'll remember everything, Dr. Mitchell said gently but firmly. The psychological trauma that triggered her medical crisis came from Madison's deliberate revelations about your relationship and future plans. Sophia will wake up knowing that you bought an engagement ring for another woman while she was pregnant with your child. The clinical precision of Dr. Mitchell's summary made Derek's betrayal sound even more devastating than it had felt during the emotional chaos of the evening. Reduced to basic facts, his behavior looked inexcusably cruel and selfish. Claire moved closer to Sophia's bedside, taking her daughter's hand with the protective gesture of a mother who had failed to prevent harm, but was determined to ensure no additional damage occurred. Derek, I need you to understand something, Claire said, her voice carrying 30 years of judicial authority. Sophia is going to need time and space to process what happened tonight. Your presence might actually impede her recovery if she feels pressured to make decisions about your marriage while she's medically vulnerable. The implication was clear. Derek might need to step back from his wife's recovery process to avoid causing additional stress that could endanger both Sophia and their unborn daughter. Tyler approached Derek with the practical questions that needed immediate attention, regardless of the emotional complexity of the situation. Where are you planning to stay tonight? Tyler asked. The penthouse is probably not the best environment for processing everything that's happened, and Sophia will need complete quiet when she comes home from the hospital. Derek realized he hadn't thought beyond the immediate medical crisis to consider the practical implications of his marriage potentially ending and his living situation becoming complicated by the scandal Madison had created. The conversation was interrupted by Sophia stirring in her hospital bed, her eyes opening slowly as the sedation began wearing off. Her first conscious moment would determine whether she could handle seeing Derek or whether his presence would trigger another medical crisis. Sophia's eyes opened slowly, taking several moments to focus on the hospital room around her and the faces of the people who had gathered during her medical crisis. Her first conscious thought was about her daughter, and her hand immediately moved to her pregnant belly to check for movement. The baby is fine, Dr. Mitchell said gently, recognizing Sophia's immediate concern. Strong heartbeat, normal movement. No signs of distress from what happened earlier. Relief flooded Sophia's face as she felt her daughter moving in response to her touch. But the relief was quickly replaced by the painful memory of Madison's revelations about Derek's engagement ring purchase and future plans with his mistress. How long have I been unconscious? Sophia asked, her voice hoarse from the medical procedures she had undergone during the emergency surgery. About 6 hours, Claire replied, taking her daughter's hand with the protective warmth that had sustained Sophia through every major crisis of her life. You had seizures from stress, but the doctors were able to stabilize everything. Sophia looked around the room and noticed Derek sitting in the corner chair, his appearance disheveled and his expression showing what appeared to be genuine remorse. But the sight of her husband triggered an immediate spike in her blood pressure that was visible on the monitoring equipment. I remember everything, Madison said. Sophia told Derek, her voice gaining strength despite her physical exhaustion. The engagement ring, the apartment, the plans you made together while I was dealing with pregnancy complications. Derek leaned forward in his chair, desperate to explain or apologize or somehow minimize the damage his choices had caused. But Claire's judicial instincts warned her that Derek's emotional state might lead him to say things that would make the situation worse rather than better. Derek, I think you should step outside while Sophia processes what happened, Claire suggested firmly. She needs to focus on her recovery without feeling pressured to manage her emotions right now. But Sophia surprised everyone by asking Derek to stay, though her reasons weren't what he might have hoped to hear. "No, I want him here," Sophia said, her voice taking on a strength that reflected the mental clarity that sometimes followed traumatic experiences. "I have things to say, and I want to say them while I'm thinking clearly." Tyler moved closer to Derek, recognizing that Sophia was about to deliver consequences that Derek wasn't emotionally prepared to handle. But this conversation was necessary for both Sophia's recovery and any possibility of their marriage surviving Madison's systematic destruction. "Derek, I need you to understand something," Sophia began, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of what she was about to say. "What Madison did tonight wasn't just an affair or even an emotional betrayal. She deliberately tried to kill our daughter." The stark truth of Sophia's statement hit everyone in the room with surprising force. Madison's psychological attack on a pregnant woman in medical distress hadn't just been cruel. It had been potentially lethal to both mother and child. When she told me about the engagement ring while I was having contractions, she knew it could trigger premature labor or worse. Sophia continued, "She was willing to endanger our baby's life to destroy our marriage. And you made that possible by giving her the information and ammunition she needed." Derek's face showed that he was finally understanding the full scope of what had happened. Madison hadn't just revealed information about their relationship. She had weaponized that information to cause maximum psychological damage during Sophia's most vulnerable moment. "But what I need to understand," Sophia said, looking directly at Derek with the kind of clarity that came from nearly losing everything, "is whether you were a willing participant in her plan or just a tool she used to get what she wanted." The question forced Derek to confront his own culpability in ways that went beyond simple adultery or marriage problems. Had he deliberately provided Madison with information that could be used to hurt Sophia, or had he been manipulated by someone who understood exactly how to exploit his weaknesses? Tyler stepped forward with the investigation results he had compiled, recognizing that Sophia deserved to know the full truth about Madison's background and methods. "Sophia, there are some things about Madison that Derek didn't know," Tyler said carefully. "She has a pattern of targeting married executives, extracting money and commitments from them, then using that information to damage their marriages when it serves her purposes." Sophia listened to Tyler's findings about Madison's employment history and previous relationships, processing the information with the analytical skills that had made her successful in marketing before she gave up her career to support Derek's business. "So I was never the problem," Sophia said with a mixture of relief and anger. "Our marriage wasn't falling apart because of anything I did or didn't do. Madison was systematically undermining it as part of a plan to replace me." The revelation that Madison's pursuit of Derek had been a calculated business strategy rather than genuine romantic attraction changed how everyone understood the crisis that had unfolded over the past few months. Derek found his voice after processing Tyler's investigation and Sophia's analysis, finally understanding that he had been both perpetrator and victim in Madison's manipulation scheme. "Sophia, I was so stupid," Derek said, his voice breaking with what appeared to be genuine remorse. "Madison made me feel like our marriage problems were inevitable, like you and I were just incompatible in ways that couldn't be fixed. She convinced me that leaving you was the only way either of us could be happy." Sophia studied Derek's face, looking for signs of authentic regret versus the calculated apologies she had heard too many times during their marriage when business deals went wrong or social obligations were forgotten. "Derek, I need to ask you something, and I need you to give me a completely honest answer," Sophia said. "If Madison hadn't attacked me tonight, if her plan had worked and I had just quietly divorced you after discovering your affair, would you have married her?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, testing whether Derek was capable of the kind of brutal self-honesty that would be required to rebuild any trust between them. Derek's answer would determine not just the future of their marriage, but whether he had learned anything from nearly losing his family to someone who had played him for a fool. Derek's silence lasted longer than anyone in the room was comfortable with, but Sophia waited patiently for an answer that would determine the future of their relationship and their daughter's family structure. The medical monitors continued their steady rhythm, tracking both mother and baby during this crucial conversation. "Yes," Derek finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "If tonight hadn't happened, if Madison's plan had worked the way she intended, I probably would have married her within 6 months of our divorce being finalized. The honesty of Derek's admission was devastating, but also somehow liberating for Sophia, who had spent months questioning her own perceptions and wondering if she was imagining problems in their marriage. "Thank you for telling me the truth," Sophia said, her voice stronger than anyone expected, given the magnitude of Derek's betrayal. "Madison almost succeeded in destroying our family, but she also revealed something important that I needed to know." Claire moved closer to Sophia's bedside, recognizing the strength her daughter was drawing from finally understanding the full scope of what she had been dealing with for months without knowing it. "What did she reveal?" Claire asked gently. "That the marriage I was fighting to save didn't actually exist anymore." Sophia replied with remarkable clarity. "I was trying to reconnect with a husband who had already emotionally divorced me and was planning a future with someone else. Madison just made me aware of reality instead of letting me continue living in denial." Tyler watched Derek process Sophia's words, seeing his business partner confront the consequences of choices that had seemed manageable when hidden, but looked inexcusable when exposed to scrutiny. Dr. Mitchell checked Sophia's vital signs and was pleased to find them stable despite the emotional intensity of the conversation she was having with Derek. Sometimes facing painful truths was less stressful than avoiding them, and Sophia seemed to be gaining strength from finally understanding her situation clearly. "Sophia, what do you want to do now?" Derek asked, though he seemed afraid of the answer. "I want to focus on having a healthy baby and building a life where I don't have to compete for my own husband's attention," Sophia said with surprising decisiveness. "I want our daughter to grow up seeing what a healthy relationship looks like, even if that means her parents aren't together." The word divorce hadn't been spoken explicitly, but everyone in the room understood that Sophia had made a fundamental decision about her future during the hours she spent unconscious after Madison's attack. "But Derek," Sophia continued, "I want you to understand something important. This isn't happening because of what Madison did tonight. This is happening because of what you chose to do over the past 3 months while I was pregnant and vulnerable." Derek started to respond, but Sophia held up her hand with a gesture that reminded everyone of her mother's judicial authority. "Madison couldn't have destroyed our marriage if you hadn't given her the tools to do it," Sophia said firmly. "She used information you provided, promises you made, and commitments you offered. She was evil, but you were unfaithful." Tyler's phone buzzed with a message from the company's legal team, who had been working through the night to address the various implications of Madison's behavior and Derek's personal crisis affecting their business operations. "Derek, we need to discuss some business issues," Tyler said carefully, recognizing that Sophia's recovery room wasn't the appropriate place for corporate conversations but needing to address urgent matters. "Handle whatever needs to be handled," Derek replied, his focus remaining on Sophia and their conversation about their family's future. "It's not that simple," Tyler said. "Madison had access to confidential client information, financial records, and strategic plans. If she's willing to attack a pregnant woman to get what she wants, we have to assume she's capable of corporate sabotage or blackmail." The practical implications of Derek's affair were extending far beyond personal betrayal into potential criminal behavior that could affect the company, their employees, and their clients' confidential information. Sophia listened to Tyler's concerns and realized that Madison's predatory behavior had created risks that went far beyond her marriage and family. "Tyler, what kind of information did Madison have access to?" Sophia asked, her marketing background helping her understand the potential scope of damage to business relationships and client trust. "Everything," Tyler replied grimly. "Client contracts, financial projections, merger discussions, international expansion plans. If she decides to sell that information to competitors or use it for blackmail, we could lose everything we've built." Derek's phone buzzed with another message from Madison, despite Tyler's earlier efforts to block her contact information. She had apparently acquired a new phone number to continue her harassment campaign. "Give me the phone," Claire demanded with judicial authority. "As a retired judge, I want to see exactly what kind of harassment we're dealing with for legal documentation purposes." Claire read Madison's latest message and her expression hardened with the kind of anger that had made her famous for delivering harsh sentences to people who preyed on vulnerable victims. "Derek, Madison is threatening to release private information about your marriage and Sophia's medical condition unless you agree to honor your engagement commitments to her," Claire announced. "This has moved beyond harassment into criminal blackmail territory." The revelation that Madison was now attempting extortion added federal crimes to her growing list of legal problems and demonstrated that her behavior was escalating rather than ending after being removed from the hospital. Sophia felt her daughter kicking vigorously, as if the baby could sense the tension and danger surrounding their family situation. The movement reminded everyone that innocent life was at stake in this conflict that Madison had initiated. "I want to press charges," Sophia said firmly, "against Madison for assault, harassment, attempted extortion, and anything else the prosecutors can prove. I want her in prison where she can't hurt other families the way she tried to hurt ours." Margaret Mitchell nodded approvingly at Sophia's decision, recognizing that pursuing justice was often an important part of recovery for victims of psychological and physical violence. "I'll contact the district attorney's office first thing Monday morning," Claire said with the satisfaction of someone whose professional connections could ensure serious crimes received appropriate attention from law enforcement. Derek looked around the room at the people who were mobilizing to protect his family from the consequences of his own poor choices. Finally understanding that he had nearly lost everything that mattered because he had been manipulated by someone who understood exactly how to exploit masculine insecurity and midlife dissatisfaction. 6 weeks after the hospital confrontation that had changed everything, Sophia gave birth to a healthy 7-pound daughter they named Emma Claire Caldwell. The delivery was smooth and uncomplicated, a stark contrast to the trauma that had marked the beginning of Emma's life story. Derek was present for the birth, but his role had fundamentally changed from husband and father to co-parent and contributor to their daughter's welfare. The divorce proceedings had moved forward with surprising efficiency, helped by Derek's genuine desire to accept responsibility for his choices and provide generously for Sophia and Emma's future. Madison Torres was serving an 18-month prison sentence after pleading guilty to assault, harassment, attempted extortion, and corporate espionage charges. The investigation into her background had revealed similar patterns of behavior with at least 3 other wealthy men, and her prosecution had become a high-profile case that helped other victims come forward. Sophia held Emma in her arms at their new apartment, a spacious 2-bedroom unit just 15 minutes from Derek's penthouse, but worlds away from the emotional chaos that had defined their marriage. The apartment was filled with natural light, comfortable furniture that Sophia had chosen herself, and photographs of the friends and family who had supported her through the most difficult period of her life. Tyler Brooks knocked on Sophia's door that Saturday morning, carrying the legal documents that would finalize the last details of her separation from Caldwell Dynamics and ensure her financial independence for life. Tyler had become an unexpected ally during the crisis, and his business partnership with Derek had evolved to include protecting Sophia and Emma from any future manipulation or harassment. "The trust fund is fully established," Tyler told Sophia as Emma slept peacefully in her arms. "Emma's education, health care, and living expenses are guaranteed through college, and your own financial security is protected regardless of what happens to Derek's business." Sophia appreciated Tyler's thoroughness in ensuring that Madison's attempt to destroy their family hadn't succeeded in creating long-term financial vulnerability for her or Emma. "How is Derek handling everything?" Sophia asked, though her tone suggested genuine concern rather than romantic attachment. "He's in therapy twice a week and seems genuinely committed to understanding how he became capable of the choices he made." Tyler replied, "But Sophia, I want you to know that his recovery process isn't your responsibility. You have every right to focus on your own healing and Emma's welfare." Dosh Mitchell arrived for his weekly visit to check on both Sophia and Emma, a routine he had maintained since their discharge from the hospital. As both a physician and Sophia's uncle, he had appointed himself as the family's medical advocate and protector. "Emma is thriving," Dr. Mitchell announced after examining the baby. "Perfect weight gain, excellent reflexes, no signs of any lasting effects from the stress she experienced before birth." Sophia looked down at her daughter's peaceful face and marveled at Emma's resilience and strength. Despite the trauma that had marked her prenatal development, Emma seemed determined to embrace life with joy and curiosity. "Uncle James, I want to ask you something," Sophia said carefully. "I've been thinking about going back to school to become a patient advocate, specifically for women dealing with domestic violence during pregnancy. Would that be realistic with a new baby?" "Doctor?" Mitchell's face lit up with approval and pride at Sophia's decision to transform her trauma into purpose that could help other vulnerable women. "Sophia, There's a desperate need for advocates who understand both the medical and emotional complexities of what you experienced, Dr. Mitchell said enthusiastically. The hospital would be honored to support your education and provide practical training opportunities. The conversation was interrupted by Derek's arrival for his scheduled weekly visit with Emma. The custody arrangement they had established allowed him regular time with his daughter while maintaining clear boundaries that protected Sophia's emotional recovery. Derek looked healthier than he had in months, though he carried himself with the humility of someone who understood that he was earning rather than deserving the privilege of being part of his daughter's life. "How is she doing?" Derek asked, approaching carefully and waiting for Sophia's permission before coming closer to see Emma. "She's perfect," Sophia replied, allowing Derek to hold his daughter while maintaining the emotional distance that had replaced their former intimacy. Derek held Emma with gentle reverence, his face showing the kind of wonder that new fathers experience when confronted with the reality of having created new life. But his expression also carried sadness for everything he had lost through his own choices. "Sophia, I want you to know that I understand why you can't forgive me," Derek said quietly while Emma slept in his arms. "But I hope someday Emma will understand that I'm committed to being the kind of father who deserves her love and respect." "Derek, forgiveness isn't about whether you deserve it," Sophia replied with the wisdom that often emerged from surviving trauma. "Forgiveness is about whether I choose to let your mistakes define my future. I forgive you because I don't want to carry anger while I'm raising our daughter." Tyler watched the interaction between Derek and Sophia, recognizing the maturity and grace that Sophia had developed through surviving Madison's attack and Derek's betrayal. She had transformed from victim to survivor to advocate in ways that inspired everyone around her. As Derek prepared to leave after his visit, Emma began crying for the first time that day, as if she could sense the emotional complexity of her parents' relationship and her own role in their continuing connection. "She knows you're her daddy," Sophia said gently, helping Derek comfort Emma before he had to leave. "That bond isn't going away, regardless of what happened between us." Derek kissed Emma's forehead and handed her back to Sophia with the careful reverence of someone who understood that this privilege could be revoked if he failed to continue earning it through consistent behavior and genuine change. After Derek left, Sophia settled into her favorite chair with Emma and reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment of peace and security. Madison Torres had tried to destroy their family, but she had inadvertently created space for something healthier to grow. Sophia's phone buzzed with a message from Claire, who was arriving the next day to help with Emma and discuss Sophia's plans for returning to school. The message included a photo of the nursery Claire had set up at her house for when Emma visited her grandmother. Emma stirred in Sophia's arms and opened her eyes, looking up at her mother with the kind of trust and love that made every difficulty worthwhile. Sophia realized that the life she was building now, as a single mother surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her welfare, was more authentic and sustainable than the marriage she had been trying to save. The late afternoon sun streamed through the apartment windows, illuminating the future that Sophia and Emma would build together, a future based on honest relationships, genuine security, and the knowledge that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you creates space for the best thing that can grow from it. Madison Torres had failed in her attempt to destroy their family, but she had succeeded in revealing truths that needed to be faced. Now Sophia was free to build a life where love was freely given rather than desperately sought, where trust was earned rather than assumed, and where her daughter would grow up seeing what strength looked like when it was supported by people who chose to stand up for justice and protection. The blood on the hospital floor had been washed away long ago, but the strength it had revealed would last forever.